How's everybody doing? I'll try to make this dynamic, but I really have to point this remote at the computer. So I'll do it in a very graceful way. So when I heard the theme layers, for me it was about building community. How do you do that in layers? How do you start with an idea and make it come to fruition? And then also, how do you build community while you don't like to actually interact with people? So give stuff to the crowd. All right, so you're asking yourself, who is this man? Who is this weirdo in front of me? It's me. If I could sing like Elphaba, I would sing It's Me. So I'll get into kind of the layers of who I am, and then the layers professionally of how it kind of got me to where I am now. These are my layers. So kind of my base layer, and a lot of people don't know this, but I'm diagnosed with level 1 ASD. If you don't know what that is, it's autism. Level 1 ASD used to be referred to as Asperger's syndrome. It's not really how you see it on TV. Like, I wasn't a doctor at 14. I cannot play concert piano. But I will get hyper-focused on one thing. And there are lots of other things, but this won't be an autism talk, but that does kind of drive my interactions professionally, which we'll get into later on. An absolute love for cartoons when I was growing up, a love for sports. I played baseball while growing up until I realized I wasn't good enough, and so now I pivoted. I was raised in Coleraine, if you're familiar with the area. It is referred to commonly as the West Side. Sometimes. You'll know somebody went to Coleraine because they'll ask you what high school you went to. Lack of filter and singular focus, that's kind of tied to this. And then my daughter saw which layers I had and she says, where's mommy and I? So my wife and daughter are always on top of mind, and they actually do drive some of the decisions I make now. And yeah, my wife's actually back there. Also part of this, you'll notice I might just make eye contact with her the whole time. So as far as like my professional journey, how I got doing what I'm doing, it started at UC. I went to UC, I graduated from UC, and then I got a job immediately upon graduation as an academic advisor for the criminal justice program, substance abuse counseling, paralegal studies, all things I had no experience with, but that's okay. So I was there in 2008. I stayed there for 8 years, went through puberty, clearly. And it was an office job. I would go, I did not live for my job, I just went to work. It was very stressful towards the end. We won't get into that, that's a longer talk about college harassment. On me, I didn't harass anybody. And it was very stressful, and it was ruining my day, it was ruining my relationship. Say your base layer is like your soil, right? Are people feeding into it? Are they adding good nutrients, or are they spilling battery acid on it? And that was kind of this situation, and I could have stayed there, and I could have kept going, and just put my head down, but then, I would have probably had a heart attack at 55, so I had to get out of there. And in a move that was confusing to most, I went from UC to a place called Life Formations. This place is in Madeira, and what we would do is make static and animatronic figures for amusement parks. So the 6 months I was there, this is a 10-foot dinosaur. This is Fred Flintstone here. We built a bunch of Flintstones things for WB, but it was like Warner Brothers Dubai. And we would make those in Ohio. It was really weird. But I was there with a lot of kids that had just graduated from art school. I did not go to art school. They were working like 70-hour weeks, covered in fiberglass, and I was like, I'm not doing that. You guys don't have to do that. But there I made a lot of good connections. Jonathan Queen I pick his name up real fast, I just dropped that. But he's a muralist in the city. If you've seen the Toy Heritage mural, it's a big one, the Kroger mural. He's amazing, the carousel. I met him while I was there. I geeked out on him day one, and I was just kind of like, "What? Why are you here?" You know. But from that, I went to, so actually my last day there, they were going to promote me to the head of this department I didn't really want to be in. And we went to have a talk, and I said, "This is not going to go. How do you think it's going to go?" And I quit. For the second time, I quit UC. Fun fact about UC, if you've seen Shawshank Redemption, not to go backwards, but I did print out a poster of Raquel Welch and hang it in my office. And then under that was the warden looking through the tunnel. My only regret there is I didn't get to see that pay off. So I quit Life Formations and I got this job at Artworks. It was a contract position for this thing called Blink. Nobody really knew what it was. I name dropped Jonathan there as well. And when I interviewed for the job, I kind of got the interview, I think, because I emailed Kit Andrews, who I thought would be the boss of that position. She was not, but she connected me on a thread with the people at Artworks. They proceeded to have a conversation about me while I was CC'd on it. They didn't know I was CC'd on it. So I think they brought me in for an interview, just like, well, we better just talk to him. And there were two options. One was to be a program manager. One was to kind of run this thing called Blink. And I was very interested in that. So my role in that was putting together the parade, curating, managing the parade, and the light-based installations in 2017. So I went from somebody that when I went to UC, I was very focused. I was by myself in my office. I had students come in and out. But I was suddenly thrust into this large community building activity. Did anybody go to the one in 2017? The OG, the original? So part of that, and part of being from Coleraine, my lair there, Kit, again, and I, there are a lot of programs within the city. They're all beautiful, but a lot of the kids, like when I went to Coleraine, we didn't have any public art. We didn't even know that was a thing. So our goal was we got a bunch of students from Cincinnati Public Schools involved in the parade. And it was awesome. We got them buses, we got them down. We were at the top of Vine Street. I think 600 lanterns we had. And part of, it's not a superpower. Autism's not a superpower, but it did allow me to drill holes through 600 dowel rods with Pam Kravitz and Carla Lamb. And we put all these kits together, and these kids had them. And we got the buses for them so they could get in and out, because a lot of people from where I'm from are afraid to go downtown. So we tried to make it as seamless as possible for them. Getting the light-based installations that first year and making it really dense so wherever you're standing you could see the next one. So that was kind of my introduction into we can actually use art to invigorate a community, to make it interesting. While I was there, so 5 partners worked on Blink. One of them was the Chamber of Commerce, Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber is the technical name for it. And I worked there with a bunch of people while I was on Blink, and I thought they were rock stars because they were making everything happen. So some people ideate, some people execute, and I'm like, you can fucking do both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So I switched over after Blink, that ended, to the Chamber of Commerce. Full disclosure, I thought we were going to do Blink again in 2018, and I was like, oh, this is great. I'll just go over here. They're going to pay me more. I can do the exact same thing I did in 2017. We did not do it in 2018. Spoiler alert. It happened in 2019. So I was kind of there, and they didn't really know what to do with me. And so while there, I was like, all right, well, let me make the best of this. It was feeling administrative again. I got to do some creative things. If you've been to Asian Food Fest, in 2018, working with Asian Addy and that team, my brother and I built this 8-foot takeout box in Washington Park. Had rope for noodles, giant chopsticks. It was awesome to see people come and take their pictures in front of it. They were engaged. It also offered some shade if you've ever been in Washington Park in the summer. And that was just something, nobody asked me to do that. I just saw an opportunity, and I thought this would be cool. Do you have $500 for wood? We'll figure it out. And we did. And then the other cool thing, so part of Layers, there are things like you might want to do and you don't know how to do them, or you have a good idea and you don't know where to put it. Like keep it in your back pocket, that's what I do. So like for the first blink I wanted to put a Ferris wheel somewhere, but they are very heavy. They require lots of power, and you can't sit them on top of a parking garage or anything like that. They're too heavy, it would cave it in. So I remembered that, and I had always kind of had these conversations with this company called SkyStar. And so an opportunity came up when I was at the chamber. It was the bank's anniversary project. I don't remember if it was like the 10th or 20th. That detail doesn't really matter. But I asked to go to that meeting, and they had put this group together, and they were talking about like, oh, we could do a beer run, or we could do like I'm an old white, so I can say this. Everything they were saying was old and white. And I was like, this is so boring, dude. Like, what if we put a giant Ferris wheel on the lawn downtown? And that took some convincing for people. But we did it, if you saw it. And kind of the selling point on that was it made the chamber a lot of money. We worked out a contract with them, it made a lot of money. We put it right there in front of the Freedom Center. It was also an opportunity for me. There are events in Cincinnati, but they all kind of revolve around drinking. I wanted to do something that a family could partake in. Like Oktoberfest is great, but if you don't want to get sloshed at 12 a.m. over bratwurst, it might not be your bag. So we put that there, and it was, I think it was pretty cool. It added to the skyline. And then it got to be a part of the 2019 Blink as well. Had COVID not hit, that would have been a permanent fixture. But you can't be in a gondola during COVID. So they had to go. I think it's in San Francisco now, if I am correct. So I was there, I got this super cool professional headshot. And since they didn't really know what to do with me, the second Blink was coming around, and I was supposed to be there for innovation, but they wanted me to do basically toilets and volunteers for the second Blink, and I was like, I'm out of here. So I quit again, no Raquel Welch poster this time. But before that, I did secure like the Lindner Center of Hope. Wanted to do an installation around their Make Waves campaign. It had gotten pitched to a couple of the partners, but they kind of tried to wedge their thing into it, and I just looked at it. I pitched them this idea in 5 minutes. My boss wanted to pitch it to him. I said, no, I'll do it. And so we did, and I interviewed people that were at the Lindner Center of Hope, or they had family members there, if you're not familiar. It's people dealing with mental health issues. We interviewed them, I recorded them, I took their portraits, we hung them in an alleyway. There was 3 neon signs. It was very nice, it was intimate. But little did the chamber know that that check that I was going to get for that was going to kind of be my jumping off point to quit. So like every day I was like, did we get that check yet? So I did quit. My wife was like 4 months pregnant at the time, 6 months pregnant, and she allowed me to quit. But before I quit, let me get into that. It did it. All right. While I was there, since there wasn't a lot of creative things to do, I started to branch out and try to do my own creative things and kind of add layers to my community. So we lived on 9th and Vine, and I walked to 4th Street every day. But the old pedal wagon building used to look like this. One of the layers, the relationship layers that I built, was with a guy named Stu that owned Pedal Wagon. I put him in the Blink Parade. So I knew him, and I would just walk by this building all the time when I was walking the dog. And I was like, this is so ugly. You ever thought about revamping that? And he was like, definitely, but we want to do this thing here. I said, that's fine, let's redo everything. So I thought it looked much nicer. Part of that, and I'll go back to it, is that was not my design, and I was like, that's the last time I'll ever paint something that's not my design. So then walking down the street also to go to work, the Garfield Hotel, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's hideous. It's unoccupied. And there was a DCI sticker on the window. I knew them from Blink. And so I contacted them. I said, I would really like to just paint this thing. I'll just paint it. It's like this curved wall. If you guys cover the cost, they were like, that person's a nightmare. But Alan at Algin Furniture has been looking for a mural for months now, if you want to connect with him. So I connected with him. I said, look, I'm going to design this. You just pay for the paint. I just want to kind of beautify the area. He said, sure. I'm not one to not pander to a community. 2024's best public art according to the city. So I did that. And that was fun. That was the first time I had ever used spray paint. He did not know that. And so I did that, and then he had me go around back of the building, and I did a couple superhero murals back there, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, maybe I could do this. Wouldn't it be exciting if I did 19 of these in 2019? I'll call it 19 and 19. I met a man named Phil Armstrong, who's awesome. If you know who he is, he goes by Cincy Phil on Instagram. I definitely recommend following. He was running Cincinnati Refined at the time, and I just wanted to get the word out. So I talked to him, and we put out this article about how I want to do 19 murals in 2019 at a cost. In that, I got a lot of responses from, and so that kind of jump-started me in doing murals. I got to do the library. That was one. They had some ideas, and I said, we're not going to do that. They wanted to do a lot of red. I was like, your red signage at the library is very bold, like it's aggressive. Let's soften it. It already is kind of designed like a prison. I like to think that this was the spear, the tip of the spear that got the library completely renovated on the other side. And there is a grain of truth to that, but there's also a lot of my ego in that. So I got to do a bunch of those. I did about 13, I think, and then Kroger asked me to do something. I said, you're the largest grocery store in the United States, you can pay me to do that. So they did. So I put a bunch of produce in the parking garage, and I put faces on them. I actually got to put my grandpa's face on a blueberry, because he loved Kroger. He loved the Marty and Joe commercials, let's go Kroger. So I built up enough equity there. I had the Kroger job lined up. I had the Lindner Center of Hope thing. So that kind of gave me a runway to quit. And then so I started this company called Makeshift Mammoth, and the whole idea behind it was to add layers to my community, to beautify the areas I live in. If you actually map out all my murals, they're probably going to be where I'm living or working. So I decided to do that, and I wanted to go into areas. So I grew up in Coleraine. There were no murals in Coleraine. So I wanted to go into the areas that don't get the murals. I mean, we get them in the city, it's fantastic, but on the outskirts, they often don't have that public art. They don't know that's an option. A lot of people I'm family with or went to high school with, they could view art as exclusive. Maybe it's, it's for the liberal elites and all that good stuff. So I thought, let's bring them into the fold. Like, let's show them that everybody can be a part of this. Art is inclusive. Maybe we won't have these crazy fringe groups if we actually can come together and show that we're all working together. So I would go into areas. I actually got to paint the first mural in Coleraine Township. And it was actually, it's like 2 blocks from where my grandma lived, which was even cooler. And I talked to them, and that community was really working on pollinator gardens at the time. And so I wanted to do something with them, but still keep it myself. They also came back and they were like, what if we had tanks and American flags and helicopters? No. If I have one goal other than beautifying the area, it's to completely get rid of like the covered wagon mural. You know? But I didn't want to discount them either, because it's their community. So the thing I ended up doing, I put a yellow ribbon on a couple of the trees. And it was kind of a nice, subtle little nod. It's actually my nephew and niece. And in my personal layers, how that comes in, cartoons, clearly. And then my daughter was watching a lot of Bluey, and so I based the trees on Bluey. I went into Greensburg, Indiana. They had contacted me. They saw that article. But this was after that, so it took like 3 years, I think, to make this happen. This is the rec center. They just started playing pickleball. I had pitched them Homer Simpson playing pickleball. They didn't go for it. So I just changed it to a bear, and that was fine. So you can clearly see that's Homer. Again, my love for cartoons. But this was kind of nice because they had no public art either. Actually, I had like a separate thing. I wanted to paint every building. This color is called high maintenance pink. We'll get into, so I'll get into later what people shout at me while I'm painting murals. But on this one particularly, a man pulled up and said I should be shot for painting the building that color. And I thought this is exactly where I should paint. But since then, they got like a water pad. They've got 3 more murals there. So it's kind of like a way to get interest in the community. If they see something like that going up, they're like, oh, people actually care. So right, like how do I make a mural happen? There are layers to it, right? So it doesn't just happen overnight if you've ever been a part of one of those projects. Murals cost money, they require equipment, they require a wall. But the biggest thing for me is, and somebody that doesn't like to interact with people, is you gotta do a lot of cold calling, a lot of emailing, and you gotta work your ass off. I do a lot of work, all of it by myself, really. I think that kind of goes into, it's the first time I've ever got along with my boss. And that kind of goes back to kind of some of the social issues I have, and I'm aware of them, so I work on them, but I tend to see things as like, it should be this way. I don't understand if it's not this way. For example, I quit the chamber. That Ferris wheel made 6 figures for them. I was asking for a small portion of it to do something else, and they're like, well, we can't do that. I was like, yeah, but you have it, like, here. Like, yeah, but we don't do that. And that doesn't make sense to me, and so then there's a rub, automatically. Same thing kind of happened at Artworks. But looking back, I realized, I could have approached that differently. But this mural, for example, this is in Newport. This just went up. And kind of how this came to fruition, the layers of that is I live in northern Kentucky now. When the Blink map came out, I knew they were expanding into northern Kentucky. They had done it before, but there were no murals going up in Newport. And so when I was doing 19 and 19, the now mayor, Tom Gaduli, had reached out to me about something. It never came to fruition. I remembered him. I contacted people I knew at ArtsWave. I was like, let's get a mural in Newport. Like, we can do it before Blink. Let's make this happen. We tried to get it before Blink. It didn't work out, but we did. So I literally just walked Newport and found some walls and knocked on doors, which, if you see something, try to make it happen. That would be a part of this. The layers there, like, actually go into the community you want to help. They were all for it. If you tell somebody, do you want a free mural, they usually go for it. But Tom Gaduli funded that. I helped fund that. And by that I mean I did it for free. He paid for the paint and the equipment. But I wanted something in northern Kentucky, and nobody was going to give that to me, so you just make it happen. And to go back to my interest, art and sports, Bengals jersey, Anthony Munoz jersey on Wonder Woman, cartoon gloves. I also have a daughter and a wife, and my daughter, I want her to see strong, powerful women in these murals. Pander, pander, pander to the crowd. And I actually put my wife and daughter's initials in every mural I do, so if you ever see EDS or KLDS, that is what it is. I will also put Be Kind in all of my murals as an additional layer. I worked with somebody named Rich Wahlberg at the Chamber of Commerce. I don't know if you know who he is. He passed away, unfortunately. He was awesome. I'm not going to cry here. But he had this whole thing about Be Kind. He actually helped me kind of be the person I am, because he put me on TV in 2017 for Blink a lot. And so that was kind of fun, and I kind of was like, I'm out in the community, this is awesome. Maybe? There we go. So here's some of the murals I did, and kind of the layers of how these happen. I did a Bengals mural in Covington. That got seen by the owner of this building. Covington did a placemaking grant for signage. We took that, kind of interpreted it in our own way. So this was the signage for a plant store. The layer to that also is the best play I've been to is Little Shop of Horrors, a playhouse in the park. My wife and I went to, so plant store, Archer 2. It worked out well. North College Hill is actually the first place I ever lived. So getting to go into there, this is a barber shop. They let me do Frankenstein, so that worked out. The first Bengals mural I did in Covington on the side of Jack's Glass, that actually started right before they went on their Super Bowl run. I said, can I just paint this Tiger head? They let me do it, and then they came back a couple of years later like, hey, what would it cost to do the whole building? And we did that. And then when the Reds were kind of good a couple of years ago, at the start of the season, the other side of the building on Stadium Liquor, I was like, what if we did a Reds one? And so with that one too, they covered the cost of the paint. That was kind of the deal, because I brought them this idea randomly after a Reds game. They tipped me afterwards, which was nice. And a layer there to that Bengals mural on the side of Jack's Glass, their revenue for their parking increased $2,000 a month.
Wow.
So again, murals kind of help, and there are layers to it. Like, it can be financially beneficial to the area. And then so somebody saw that one that owned Uncorked, the liquor store, and they paid me to paint this mural here for Covington. So like, I don't recommend doing free work. Like, it's not the best business advice in the world. But there are layers to it, right? Like, it would cost me more to pay for a billboard that big than it does the actual paint. I get to put my name really big on it. I do that because I'm an egomaniac, but also a lot of the murals around town, you don't know who painted them. You're like, oh, that's an artworks mural. It's like, well, that's a Jenny Eustick mural. But so I wanted people to know, kind of like, hey, put your name on your stuff so that you can get gigs afterwards. It's a giant advertisement. But it also led to work, and I'll usually do these when work is very slow. And then it will usually lead to something else, which is nice. And again, like, I get to paint cartoons and all this. I get to paint these layers in my community and use my experiences to do so. So I'm not a very social person. I do better speaking in front of a large group of people than one-on-one. Because, you know, you don't get to talk back to them. But I do get to engage with the community, one, in several layers, right? Like, I'm adding a mural to your community. I'm out there painting it, and I actually get to interact with people while painting. These are some things that they shout at me. It's really fun when you're 20 foot up on a boom lift and somebody's like, you spelled it wrong! It's not jarring at all. But surprisingly, that gets said a lot, even if there's no letters on the mural. While I'm actively painting, hey, did you paint that? Nope. But the other thing they shout out is thank you all the time, which is kind of nice. But I get to meet the people in the community. I get to talk to them. You can talk to me while I'm painting. It's also nice for me because I am painting, so I automatically have an automatic out. If you're chatting and I feel uncomfortable now, I just start, yeah, that's great. Totally, and then they usually will. But it is fun to talk to people in the community. They get excited about it. They want to know what's happening. They want to know, a lot of times they'll be like, oh, my brother has this building, like, could you do something there? So it's really good to get a gauge on the community. They talk about, like, the excitement of the mural going up or the other things that they've noticed going up in their community. They'll tell me things going on in the community that I can get interested in. So this is a nice way to build community while, again, like, kind of being an antisocial person. And so there are other ways I've tried to build little niche communities based on my special interests. And this is one you can do from home. I can't always be out painting murals. They're long endeavors. It's hard work. I am getting old, and old gray Mary, what she used to be, so it hurts my back to paint murals. So I started doing these illustrations for the Bengals. How this came up, Josh, how did you get your illustration with the Bengals? I harassed the CFO and then the director of content on LinkedIn for a season. I was doing them anyway. I would do these game day illustrations just for fun. And I would send them to them every week. It wouldn't be like, hey, any expectation, just thought you would think this is cool. It just so happened how it worked out that I got, so I started this, and then there's another organization that started doing them as well, because you can pay your way into doing those for the Bengals. And so they were doing those, and they were all right. Something happened in Buffalo Bengals game. I don't know if you remember, Damar Hamlin died on the field. He was revived, but he was dead for a while. So they were going to play the Bills in the playoffs that same season. And I sent them this. Just said, hey, just made this again. Just thought you would think it was cool. They said, actually, can we use that? And so the reason they were wanting to use this is because the other organization had pitched them something where a tiger was killing a buffalo. Probably not in good taste. So it kind of like happenstance, right? The layers to that. Somebody biffed it. I had been putting out a bunch of work to them, annoyingly. And then it kind of culminated. They were last minute. They needed something, and they couldn't use that thing. And so they said yes. And so I got to do this one. Ren and Stimpy was a big influence on me growing up. But we did that one. there was no promise to do another one, and I just drew one for the next week. And they were like, yeah, let's go with it. So we got to do another one. That one was like on NFL Network and stuff. I got to do a couple interviews because they were like, this is insane. Why would an organization put that out? So that was kind of cool. And so I've been doing those for like 3 seasons. And again, part of that base layer fixation, you can ask my wife, I've probably drawn, I don't know, 553 tigers, I think, at this point. It's not healthy. But it is fun, and I've got to meet some cool people through that. There are a lot of avid Bengals fans in Cincinnati, and a lot of them like cartoons and artwork. So I got to meet a lot of cool people there. I got to make a lot of new friends. It actually led me to doing a kids poster for the Broncos-Packers preseason game, and that got printed out and given to 70,000 people, which is really cool. Another thing, and this is where I'm going to get my Gallagher, I'm going to get my props out. So through that, there's a company called Wild Coats. Everybody's familiar?
Wow.
They were on Shark Tank, which I didn't know until after I talked to them, which was good because I'd probably been super nervous if I knew they made a deal with Robert. So I saw this coat, right? And I had a background of Bengals illustrations and murals to show them. And I saw this coat online, it was coming up in my feed, and I was like, I want that coat. And I clicked the link, but it's $460. I don't want that coat. But I sent them a message, and I was like, hey, would you give me a coat if I painted a mural in it? And they said yes. And they sent me one. So again, I built my layers, right? Like I started doing these Bengals illustrations for fun. I started painting all these murals. That led me to, clearly my algorithm was like, you should have this. But I got to then talk to them. Kind of the thing that UC helped me with, not creatively, but it was a lot of administrative work and putting things together, which a lot of creatives don't have that asset. At least some of the younger ones I know, I try to teach them professional development, like, hey, here's how you go about this, because if you're starting your own thing, somebody named Mike Tittle gave me some advice a long time ago when I told him I was thinking about going full time. Creative, he said, all right, right now, say you spend half your time making, right? Well now, you're gonna spend maybe 10% of that 50% making. You're gonna be selling, you're gonna be calling, you're gonna be putting together invoices, you're gonna be doing a lot of administrative work. So now you really, when you get time to do the creative, make sure it's something you really wanna do. That stuck with me a lot. But that UC background, I think, kind of helped me in the ability to do things like send somebody an invoice or break down a budget sheet for them, which are all things like kids coming out of art school don't necessarily know. Or that they can contact people on LinkedIn. You don't have to harass them and just send them 50 tigers, but you can make sure you have something to show them too. I would never send them something like, hey, would love to do an illustration for you. It was like, here is an illustration. Like, because a lot of people won't know something unless they see it. Other new opportunities that came from that, this is a very warm coat. They're actually a snowboarding company in Denver. It's very warm if you're interested. I also got to do Secret Walls, which is an organization, I don't know if you're familiar, if you've ever been, they do these art battles, no pencils allowed, you just use paint. The first time I did it was 2-on-2, it was at Bogart's, it was really cool, but how that came up again was I saw they were doing a tour, I was already a fan of them, I saw that they were going to come to Cincinnati and I messaged them. Like they weren't looking for me. I had to go and talk to them. And again, I had a background of all this stuff. Like if I had just been working at UC and messaged them, like, why would we do that? So I got to do that, and that was really fun. And part of my personality is I avoid talking to people, but if I decide I like you, sorry. I'm going to latch, I'm going to talk your ear off. I'm going to tell you all these weird things that pop in my head, like we're in the middle of a conversation, even though we just started that conversation. But I really liked the people at Secret Walls. They were awesome. They were creatives, but they were doers, right? So they were ideating, but they were also executing. Those are my people, those are my layers, right? And so when they came back, they did Secret Walls that same year on the side of Agar with a bunch of teams of creatives, local and international, and they painted the side of Agar. And they were going to do it again. So I had already had a relationship with them. We stayed in touch for all 2 years. And so I got, invited to do that again. And that was great because I got to actually meet a bunch of artists that I follow on Instagram, like Matt Gondak and Miss Birdie. And meeting them in person, it also made it feel like, oh, you know what, I think I belong with this group. If you were there, we were Team Jerry Springer. I don't know, did anybody go to the Secret Walls at Blink? My wife did, you did. We were Team Jerry Springer. We lost, but we did, I believe, have the most fun. Our mural had to be redacted in a couple of spots, if that tells you anything. But those were all opportunities I got from building upon ideas and sticking to things I like. If you're going to spend this much time into it, have it be something you like. And when I say that though too, when I go into a community, I will talk to them. I'm not just going to throw something up on the wall that I think they're going to hate. I will also fully render it out and show them what it's going to look like first. And then you can talk them into doing giant bees, an Offspring reference, and saying keep it pollinated. If you put yellow ribbons on the tree, right? That shows you I listen to you. I want to help your community, but also you guys probably all experience this, let creatives be creative, right? If you brought in somebody to help you with your taxes and they were like, I was thinking about this single roast, right? You should probably do this. You'd be like, bro, nothing. I feel like I'm talking to a rock star, right? My daughter and I go to Deeper Roots every day. She does call it Deeper Toots. I could have got to you before the rebrands. You might have been in business. Also, if you ever want the back of the Oakley one painted. So yes, creating those little niche communities with my very specialized interest in finding, if you think oh, I'm interested in monarch butterflies. No one else is interested in this. There are probably thousands of people interested in that. If you have this you like to draw anime, playing chess, there's probably a community for that. So just be passionate about it, put your stuff out there. You need to build your layers because nobody's looking for you until you build those up. Kind of the takeaways from this, what are they? He's been rambling. He's probably lost the thread by now. Takeaways, if you see that there's a need in your community and you don't see anybody doing something about it, be that person that does something about it. It kind of started for me, with that first Blink, we brought in all these international artists. They came and they put these murals up in 1 week. I didn't know that was a possibility. And so it's nobody's doing this in smaller communities. Everything's geared towards here. So I was all right, well, if nobody's gonna do it, I'll try. And so, yeah, I wanted to beautify more rural areas. And I was able to do that because I tried to do it, right? That was a layer I wanted to add to those communities. A lot of those communities, they have more public art than they did before. Colerane's going to get their second mural this summer outside of Northgate Mall. I have one inside of Northgate Mall. It's that same Homer Simpson bear, but as the Ultimate Warrior. And Fiona is Brett the Hitman Hart. And they're fighting. I digress. But yeah, the takeaways there are when you're building your layers, you know yourself personally. Use those to your advantage. Those are the things you're going to be interested in. And also when you're building your layers professionally, make sure somebody is feeding into you and helping you build that layer. They're not ruining that layer below you. Say you're making a trifold, right? Anybody watch Friends? Meat and then pudding, I think it was. Make sure the people, once you see somebody that's oh, they are adding water to my soil, grab them, hang on to them, keep in touch with them. And when I say keep in touch with people too, just check in. Don't always ask people for stuff because that can be off-putting. I mean, even from the other end now, I've gotten to the point where people will ask me if they can help me paint a mural. They don't know that I'm not going to do that because I just like to paint by myself. But the way they go about it is hey, let me paint a mural with you. It's do you have a portfolio? Who are you? Hello. Who are you? I'm going to put you on a boom lift? I don't know who you are. But people that have reached out and been hey, I think what you're doing is cool, here's what I'm doing. I will look for opportunities for those people. If it's not with me, it will be oh, this thing came up, I think you know, you'll be really good at this. Like, I'll put you on. Like, we're all lifting each other up. Like, don't build your layers by stepping on somebody else's, you know? Rising tides or whatever, raise all ships, something like that, I'm paraphrasing. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. So yeah, those are my layers, personally, professionally. That's how I got to where I am. I think I just finished my 70th mural, which is exciting. I'll be doing one in Milford, inside Alcon Connectors, which is kind of cool. These get me into areas of these niche places that I didn't know exist. So Alcon Connectors literally makes the brackets when you see a power box that the cords run through. Somebody has to make that. Like, I did a mural inside this place called M4 the Nick. They literally measure viscosity of liquids. Like, you need to know there's 12 ounces in this beer. Who does that? This company does that. It's amazing. So I get to go into all these communities through my specialized interest and meet all these people and kind of, you know, we're all connected, guys. I won't get too kumbaya. But if you have a special interest, you have these things that you can do. Go out. Sometimes you might have to do it without a paycheck behind it, but that can turn into a paycheck. Just make sure if you're doing something for free, it's not for exposure. It's something that will actually benefit you personally. Like, I just like this. I want this here. Or like, hey, I'll view this as like, this is a giant billboard for me. I can do that. That's kind of specialized in muralists. And I'll open it up for questions now if anybody has them. Yes?
We were talking about the Ferris wheel and like the old lights. How do you tell somebody that their idea, like you have what considered to be a better idea? How does that conversation play out for you? So you may approach it differently. What's that perspective? I
would approach it differently now.
Yeah.
And I say that, but I've still never approached it differently. Maybe a little. I've gotten really good at like I can make fun of somebody and they think I'm just joking. You know. Like, oh, Josh is being so silly. But in that situation, it was, I find a lot of times, if you need to be blunt, be blunt. Okay. In hindsight, I wouldn't have said, that's a very old white idea. I would have just said, maybe like, that's something that's always done here. What if we do something new and fresh and trying to get new eyes to the banks? Let's do something new and exciting instead of like, that's your idea. I don't like it. But sometimes also there will be a lot of cooks in a kitchen and they'll all have ideas. And sometimes you do have to be like, no man, like cut the shit. This is it. Like this is the way to go. I hear you, but we're not doing that and here's why. Maybe I'll explain like why we're not doing that. For that Keep It Pollinated mural, I told them in so much a way, so I did kind of learn from it, I guess. I didn't tell them, like, that's stupid. I said, I know people, I know vets that would be triggered by seeing a military plane. They don't want to be reminded of that. Like, war is not something we should glamorize. But let's make a note to the soldiers, because they're awesome, but we don't have to glamorize war itself. We don't have to have that in your face. We can do it subtly. And if a soldier sees that or somebody comes back and they see that yellow ribbon, they know what it is. And that could be the feedback I've gotten is it would mean more to them than if they saw like a tank on the side of the wall. But yes, finesse, maybe try to convince them that it's their idea. Like, I hear what you're saying, that's awesome, yeah, we can totally do that. But and instead of this, we did this. So yeah, that was a great idea, and it led me to this. But sometimes literally you do have to be like, no, like that's horrible. Like you brought me here. That's awful. Like I'm not going to tell Mark in marketing how to do his job. Like I don't need the accountant to tell me this should be blue. You know what I mean? Any other? Did that answer your question?
Really helpful.
All right. I recognize you from LinkedIn. Your name is Theo.
That's right. So you kind of know what kind of questions I ask.
I don't, but we'll.
Now, I was interested in the relationship between graffiti and murals, because the one is an approved version and the other one is a not approved version.
Right.
Cincinnati has a lot of murals.
Yes.
What do you think?
So, I have thoughts. A lot of the mural artists I know were graffiti artists, so it can kind of build your base layer there, going out and actually having a can in your hand. There is kind of a nice symbiotic relationship between mural artists and graffiti artists. If you'll notice, murals don't typically get tagged. That's kind of there's like a lot of respect in the graffiti communities. There's going to be some knuckleheads. But a lot of times, like I know a lot of these people, they're just looking to be seen, right? So if you put a mural, like I'll make sure if there's gonna be graffiti where I'm repainting, I will try to reach out to that graffiti artist, like, hey, I'm gonna do this thing. I see your names on it, like I'm not trying to disrespect you and put this over it. Like I'll leave 6 spray cans here if you want them afterwards. Just kind of like, hey, I acknowledge that you exist. Don't fuck with my stuff. And they typically won't. I like some graffiti. There are legal graffiti spots. I think if cities embrace that more. So there's one at the riverfront on the Covington side. There's one in Oakley. I feel like if cities embrace that more, you wouldn't have the outskirts because it would give them an outlet. A lot of times kids just want to paint and do something. Some want to be destructive. But I find that there is a balance. If you see, they usually don't tag murals, but a lot of those street artists are realizing, like, I can make a living from this. I don't have to get arrested to put up something. Yeah, that's kind of my spiel on that.
The follow-up would be more around the idea that murals tend to be approved by the people who do it.
Right.
And graffiti tend to be
Not
approved, meaning it tends to be provocative,
Yes.
political, and a whole different kind of thing. So there's a lot of murals, and I know there's some graffiti, but obviously the kind of things that say a city council will approve is very different from what graffiti artists might want to say. What do you think about the relationship between, having approved murals or things that might be more interesting or provocative?
I'm here for both. I do think if graffiti has some artistry to it and a message,
Sure.
that gets a little more public empathy than like if you're just messing up somebody's small business. But the city's always going to kick back on that, most of the time because it's city property that's going to get damaged. But they're always going to have a problem. I mean, the city always wants to put their hand in something. Like, you used to not have to get approved for murals in the city. After the first blink, they were like, we didn't make any money on this. What can we do? Oh, you know what? Every mural, we need a certificate of appropriateness. They'll give us $120. We can get in on this. But good for Agar, they butted up against that. Like, we'll give you a certificate of appropriateness. You are not telling these artists what to paint. Like, we'll make sure it's not something obscene unless it's done at Secret Walls by one Jerry Springer team. So yeah, I think they're starting to understand. I think from a city standpoint, the way to get them to be more into it is to tell them that there is actually money to be made embracing graffiti artists.
That's what worries me.
Yes.
Yeah, just want to say thank you for doing this. Like, I thought it's just super inspiring, creative, interesting, and I appreciate it. I think I've been in this space, like John told me about this morning, and I almost was going to come and say, this guy's stuff to talk about Blake. And it's sort of been in the space where, some things in the world kind of like despairing and kind of it's easy to just numb out.
Yeah.
And you coming here and speaking not just about your work and how you approach it, but some of the challenges and vulnerabilities you face, like, just kind of spoke to me. And I feel like I don't know how hard this was for you to do. You said that you do public speaking and have a little easier time with it, but I just appreciate the fact that, like, you're here. You probably have some nerves about coming up here, and I just think you did, like, a really awesome job, and I'm glad that you challenged yourself to do it, and that you were so open about it. So I just wanted to say, like, coming away very, like, inspired and in a better mood than I was when we got up this morning.
Hey, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's kind of a thing too of the work I do, is getting out of my comfort zone. I find that those are usually the times I have the most success. Like the first time I ever used a boom lift. I never used one before, and they were like, can you do that? And I just said yes. And then I figured it out. YouTube's great if you figure that out. But yeah, I appreciate that, man. It is, but it is, yes, it is easier for me to talk to a room of people than one-on-one. So like even before this, I was probably on my phone sitting back here talking to my wife or mother-in-law. But yeah, I also think it's important to be open because where I came from, I didn't see anybody like me. So now, that Greensburg girl, this will sound fake, but it is real. Kid kept riding his bike under the lift. And I was like, what are you doing? Because I'm always out here by myself. Like, I carry a pocket knife on me. Usually when you do murals, they're not in the best areas. So I was like, what is this kid doing? Like, what are you, like, don't run into that, don't touch anything. And then I was like, all right, I'm gonna say something to him. And I went down, and it is out of central casting. He was like shirtless on a bike. He was like, who you work for? And I was like, I don't work for anybody, I work for myself. He goes, no, like who you work for? It's like, I work for myself. He's like, you just paid that for yourself? I was like, well, they hired me to do it. You get paid to do that? I said, yeah, somebody's paid me to do that. He goes, shoot, maybe I'll come work for you one day. And then he just cut it off. Like, this is awesome. So yeah, that's why I don't try to make a secret about it. Because if somebody knows, like, hey, like I have a bunch of these ticks, like maybe, oh, like even right now, I'm doing it right now. That is something I do to stimulate myself. Like, oh, you know what? I'm not weird. There are more people like me, and you can build that community. So yeah, that's awesome. That made my day. I'll think about that. I won't cry as hard as I did last night watching The Pit. If anybody watches that on HBO Max, dear God, I'm emotionally wrecked for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Can you speak to stress management? Because it's difficult to create as much as you're creating without getting paid for. It's like a high water act without identity.
Yes, having a partner that is very supportive is helpful. And when I do the stuff for free, I was trying to, like, George Clooney said a thing a long time ago, like one for them, one for me. If I get like 3 paying gigs, that's typically when I'll try to, or if things are slow and nothing's happening, and I would spend this money on marketing anyway, like let me put it into this. So it is stressful. The broke artist is a real thing. So finding different ways to kind of generate that revenue and putting yourself out there. So like, I never used to do digital illustration, but I realized that, oh, you can actually make a little money from that. Like the Broncos poster, they're like, we have this much money, and that was awesome because they told me up front how much money they had. Like, that's exactly how much I need. But, you know, dealing with the stress, it's, if you can figure that out, that would be helpful. I have a lot of gray hair now. It is hard. There's a lot of sleepless nights as a creative. The other thing, and I don't know if you've experienced this, I get depressed when I finish a mural. So like, while I'm painting it, you can ask my wife, I cannot eat, not drink anything. I call it getting lost in the sauce. That's my happy place, right? And then the second that's done, soul-crushing depression. Because it's just like, oh, I'm not doing that thing. And then so I'll start to look at something else. But finding those avenues, those Bengals illustrations have been great for me because it forces me to be creative without an expectation. And I'm able to kind of scratch that itch. The other thing that helps is that we have a 5-year-old, and so I watch her, and there's not much you can do. But I had a hard time with that too. At first, I would want to be doing something else. Like I want to draw, and I'm watching my daughter, and that's like the greatest thing to say. But I'm like, I'm half here. I'm not here the whole way. Usually wherever I'm at, I'm not fully there. But yes, to answer your question, things to alleviate stress: doing the things I like. Making just for the sake of making. But yeah, I also watch hours of TV at night because I can't sleep. And then, yeah, just having somebody that supports you. Like my wife is very encouraging. So having a little tight-knit group that kind of knows. The other thing that kind of helped me too is I talk to other creatives, which I didn't do before. But it's helpful too because you realize like, oh, we're all going through this. Like, there might be some exceptions, but most of us just want to make cool stuff. It's very stressful. We'd love to get paid for it. Like, but yeah, there are some tough days. I would say for me it was just making with no expectation. Kind of helped with that. I don't know if that answered your question.
That was great. Thank you.
That's
Last
One
question.
more.
No pressure.
So you mentioned like growing up in Coleraine that there wasn't a lot of public art and that you didn't go to UC for art. So like what fostered your love of art and like what supported you and kind of trained you to do this?
I mean, the first thing, there were no public art. My mom would draw on my lunch bags every day. It would just be like Woody Woodpecker, and I don't know if anybody's seen like the old drawing of the person hanging over the wall and like their nose. So she drew on my lunch bags every day. I had some good art teachers at Houston Elementary. I got Artist of the Year in first grade. This is great. And funny enough, it was like Shotzi was in it, like the Reds. So that has stuck with me. Everything that was in that picture in first grade. And that, I had a lot of art teachers that were encouraging in like elementary school and high school. They hated me though. They were very mad at me. But that's because I realized very quickly, like, 2-week project, I'll do it the last day. Let me dick around. I didn't realize none of the other kids could dick around for 2 weeks and then do it. But just being able to draw, I think that first grade winning that thing, honestly, was like, oh, I actually can draw. And my best friend could draw too, which was wild. And we had a lot of the same interests, so we would just draw, and that kind of fostered that. But I didn't really do anything with it until, like, that first blink when I saw those artists come in. I was like, no way. And I had enough ego to be like, I could do that. But yeah, it was very late in life. I didn't want to go to art school. I didn't like people telling me what to draw, shocker. But yeah, it just kind of, I mean, everybody says, oh, I'm self-taught. But everybody's self-taught, even if you went to art school. But yeah, I think my mom helped foster that for sure. Having a best friend that did it as well. Getting some success very early on. Although I lost in the second grade, they told me it's because I couldn't win back-to-back years, which was bullshit. Amy Zoes did not earn that. But yeah, it was all...
Did you get it back in third grade?
No, I didn't. I stopped participating.
There's a lesson there.
But yeah, I would say my mom always encouraged it. Funny enough, my wife just gave me these VHS tapes for Christmas, and we're watching old things, and I'm like drawing, and my mom's trying to talk to me, and I'm not hearing her. I was like, oh, because I got a very late diagnosis. So it's like, how did we not know I had that? Does that answer?
Absolutely.